Welcome, everyone, to the Let Purple Rain podcast. I'm Joe Arpezi, otherwise known as Purple Rain. I started my CFF work in 2008, and after stepping away for 8 years, I returned in 2024 as Purple Rain. You can find all of my content at letpurplerain.com. You can also follow the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Would really appreciate any 5-star reviews that you want to leave on the new Spotify channel. It'll definitely help it grow. And most importantly, I'd recommend every one of you guys follow me over on X at UW underscore purple underscore rain, spelled REIGN. That is the best place to follow me to get the most up to date announcements, player news, as well as I like to share a lot of other great CFF content creators and their information on there. So that X account I definitely think is worth a follow if you're not already doing that here. And I'm going to start off with a couple of announcements, pretty similar to last week. Just we are getting back into the swing of the regular season of college fantasy football and just kind of reviewing what my weekly schedule is going to be for content. Mondays, you can expect waiver wire target articles where I'm going to go over my picks for I do for free. I do the honorable mentions, a handful of guys that didn't make my main portion, and I kind of roll through a number of guys at quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end. But then in the premium section, which is where I really like to kind of dive in and be a little more specific for you guys, I'll give you my top 5 picks for every position. I will go through and highlight any players that have good matchups for the current week. So if you need help right now, I'm going to cover that for you. I'm going to go over guys that have great volume workloads. So if you are just wanting to bank on volume, I'm going to be listing out a bunch of guys that are high volume. And then I know it's early, guys, but I am going to list all year long um, guys with the best playoff matchups. So if you're debating between a couple of names that you've seen in the other sections where I'm bringing up guys, maybe that playoff sections is one that might help you push one guy over the other because he helps your roster better for that crucial period. And I'm here to help you guys win a championship. So I'm going to be bringing up playoffs right from the start here. I mentioned premium subscribers get full access to all the content. If you're just a free subscriber, I've got that section for you. Tuesday, I do my player rankings. That is exclusive for premium subscribers. Thursday, which is today, you get the Start Em podcast. Whether it's on YouTube or whether it's on Spotify, I give you my selections for free for everybody. And then for premium subscribers, I answer your submitted questions. So you guys have the opportunity to give me questions for your lineup on X and on Substack. And I will put them into the show. I will answer those for you guys and be a bit more stat heavy. For those of you that are new to this, I like to be a little more stat heavy for my start sit 'em instead of just having opinions. I want something to back that for you guys so you can feel a little more safe. Or even if you disagree with me, at least you're seeing some stats that can help you feel a little more at ease if you are going to disagree with my recommendations here. And then Saturday, a new article series. I'm doing Player Prop Spotlight. I go over a handful of player props that I like for Saturday's slate. You can catch that early Saturday mornings. And, if you're not a premium subscriber and you don't have access to all of that content, just the free stuff that I put out, I will recommend that I am running 7-day free trials. I would literally say maybe wait until like a Monday and sign up then so that way you're going to get one full week of that content in that 7-day free trial. And if you don't want to continue it, you can always just cancel it, and it's not going to cost you a thing, guys. So going into the contents of today's show, as I've mentioned, YouTube and Spotify will be the home of my start sit suggestions for this week. Let Purple Rain will be the exclusive home where I answer your submitted questions and help you build the best lineup. Let's dive into some fantasy football. Actually, guys, I'm screwing that up here. Now that that's out of the way, let's dive into some college fantasy football. All right, guys, I am struggling a little bit here. We're doing struggle bus to start the day. This should be an entertaining show. I'm going to start off here with my quarterbacks. And what I do for once again, for all of you guys that are new, I'm going to review on the main show here. I'm going to review 3 players at quarterback, running back, receiver, and tight end. And then I'm going to give my start 'em or sit 'em suggestion. And what I tend to do is I go over not just who their opponent is, but I'll review what Vegas is calling for that team to score. I have a fantasy matchup grade that I hand each of these, where this is just kind of my easiest way to do an assessment of judging like how good this offense is versus that defense. And then I like to go into some advanced stats, which are slowly trickling in since we have 1 week. But I'm going to be a little wishy-washy on them this week, guys, just because you can't take everything right down to the number for these advanced stats. But I will look at how many touchdowns, whether they're passing or rushing, has a defense given up per game. I'm going to look at what the defense has done for red zone, touchdown conversion rates, and third down conversion rates to help give you a more well rounded picture. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, I do use a color coding system. We're now going to start seeing a lot more of that. Dark green is the absolute best. Light green is pretty good. A black square is just kind of neutral. Light red, not that great. Dark red, really bad. Just a quickest way to kind of sum that up for everybody that's brand new here. I like to. I don't want to assume everyone's been watching this every time. So, and I also want to say thank you to all you guys that watched week one. I was extremely happy. It was the second highest watch total I've had on a video on this channel, next to the live draft for the Battle for the Belt League. So I really appreciate it, and I hope I can keep all you guys here week to week and try and help you guys out. So I'm going to take a sip of water before we dive into the quarterbacks here. I'm going to start things off with Drew Mestamaker out of from North Texas. He is taking on Western Michigan, and Vegas is calling for North Texas to score 34 and a half points. I've given him a B minus matchup grade. Western Michigan, they've given up only one defensive passing touchdown. I don't remember exactly who their opponent was, but I believe it was like a one double A FCS school. So I'm not going to put too much stock in that only one passing touchdown given up. But the one thing I am going to put a lot of stock in is that they had a 75% red zone touchdown conversion rate. That Western Michigan defense did. That's something that I definitely like here. And for third down conversion rate, it was not very good. 30.8%. It's not the best. It's a little below that average range. But once again, I think when we look at just one opponent, this Western Michigan defense, I'm going to downgrade most of these advanced stats. But the one thing that really jumped out, and one reason why I'm really liking Mestamaker here, is that man, if North Texas gets in the red zone, they're probably going to score. With Western Michigan giving up 75% red zone touchdowns to an inferior opponent, here I think they're going to be going up against a better team. And one thing I do like about this matchup too here is that I do think this is going to be a more competitive game. Mestamaker's not going to get pulled early in this one. Um, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if North Texas could get close to or just crack 40 points in this game. So I'm really, I'm up on Mestamaker, and I know some people maybe not sure, but I'm going to wrap him up and say, quarterback Drew Mestamaker from North Texas, start him. My next guy here is Tucker Gleason out of Toledo. They are taking on Western Kentucky, and the projected score for Toledo is 33 points. I have given this fantasy matchup a B plus grade, and the advanced stats for the Western Kentucky defense. This defense played Sam Houston, who did not look very good in the week 0 opener, and they played a FCS school. So I'm not putting a lot of weight in these, but I'm still going to read them. These are all really bad numbers. Defensive passing touchdowns allowed per game, 0. Red zone touchdown conversion rate, 25%. Third down conversion rate, 22.6%. And Tucker Gleason did not do very great. He didn't put up much in terms of fantasy points. But I wanted to bring him up here because I do think he can be a starting option for you this week. If you have to start 2 quarterbacks, I think he could be a good QB2. If you're in a deeper league and he's your best QB1, I think don't be afraid to put him in. This is a game that Toledo will have to throw. I do believe Western Kentucky is going to win this one. I do believe that the Toledo ground game will try and keep it balanced, but the game script will just keep slowly transferring over more and more to Tucker running the ball, or excuse me, throwing the ball, and then potentially having those opportunities where he can tuck the ball and scramble and get some rushing yardage that way. And we know that he has a good receiver to throw to in Junior Vandeross. So, like I said, I've given this for a fantasy matchup grade a B plus, and I like the fact that Toledo's supposed to score over 30 points. We're going to assume that running back Chick Tram's probably going to snag at least one of those, one of these 4 touchdowns. So my hope is, Gleason can get at least 2 touchdowns, maybe one on the ground, vulture one from Tram. But I'm just going to say I'm not sitting here saying Gleason is going to light the world on fire, but don't be afraid to start him, depending on how your roster looks. And I think a lot of people might be scared off by his lack of fantasy performance last week. So Tucker Gleason, Toledo, start him. My last one here is Bren Morton, Texas Tech. They are taking on Kent State. Vegas is calling for Texas Tech to score 54 points. From a fantasy matchup perspective, this is an A plus. It doesn't get any better than that. Kent State, I believe, also played an FCS school, so I'm not going to put a lot of weight in these advanced stats, but that Kent State defense has only allowed one passing touchdown per game. They've given up no touchdowns in the red zone, and they're 21.4% for third down conversion rate. I'm tossing out all those numbers. I don't think they're going to apply here in this game. But the biggest issue is that Morton got hurt. His situation is still a bit unclear. I think it's one of those. Um, I would not be surprised if they clear him to play some. Maybe they let him go out a little bit, play a couple of drives, but there's no reason for Texas Tech to risk their starting quarterback this week. So even if he does play, I do not think he's going to play even one full half. He might play one quarter. If I were the coaches at Texas Tech, I would just sit him on the bench, let him rest and heal up, because you'll still blow out Kent State even without Morton in there. So even though this is a great fantasy matchup, guys, I would not be surprised if Texas Tech leaves Morton on the bench, leans more into that ground game, and for these Texas Tech receivers as well, just kind of throw one out. Like, they might be guys I think are best to sit this week, just because if we have uncertainty at quarterback, we don't know how well the passing game is going to click, or if they run, an extra 10% of the time compared to what their normal run pass distribution is. It might not be a great week for the Texas Tech passing game from a fantasy perspective. Points might just get spread around too much, or the running backs might siphon off too much production. So, Texas Tech, Brenton Morton, sit 'em. Now we're going to switch over to running backs here. And I'm going to start with Yasin Willis at Syracuse. He had a great week last week. I believe it was 3 touchdowns. I don't have the stats in front of me. He's taking on UConn this week. Vegas is calling for Syracuse to score 32.5 points, which I think might be a little low. I would not be surprised if they're in the upper 30s this week. Fantasy matchup grade wise, I give this a B plus. And UConn did play an FCS school, so these advanced stats for the UConn defense, I'm not going to put a lot of weight behind them, but only giving up 1 rushing touchdown per game, red zone touchdown conversion rate of 33%, and 31% third down conversion rate. When I look at this one, I think 2 things will happen in this game. That Syracuse passing game, I think the coaches are going to go in and game plan to try and make sure that it is up and clicking, where it was not bad in the season opener, but I think it can be better. And so I think early on you might see a lot more passing. Willis maybe isn't getting as many touches between the 20s, but I would not be surprised as soon as they get in the red zone, Willis is getting the ball. I think it's hard pressed for him not to have a 2 touchdown day, because we also know with this offense, they can throw the ball to him as well. Screen passes, design flares, check downs. So I think this is a very easy one. I had him very high in my rankings this week, and I just wanted to cover a name here that I think could. I'm not going to say he's going to get 3 touchdowns again, but I really like this setup, this matchup here. So I'm going to go here. Syracuse, Yasin Willis, start him. Next up, I got Wayman Jordan from USC. They are taking on Georgia Southern. Vegas is calling for USC to score 44 and a half points. From a fantasy matchup grade, I give this a B plus. Georgia Southern, and I forget who they played in the opening week, guys. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but whether they played a, let's say they played a Power Four opponent. Well, this will be a good comparison that we can use with USC. So I do like looking at the advanced stats here. If they played a group of five opponent, I'm going to like these advanced stats even more because it means USC should be able to do even better than what these stats show. And if they played an FCS school, I'm going to like it even more. So I'm going to lean pretty heavily into these advanced stats. In that Georgia Southern defense, they gave up 5 rushing touchdowns last week. Um, Red zone touchdown conversion rate is only 57%, which is about average. But that third down conversion rate of 60% is really good from a fantasy perspective here for Jordan. So one of the concerns and why I wanted to bring up Jordan is that USC offense, they really spread the ball around a lot against Missouri State. Yes, I think you could see some of that here, but you are going to see a step up, slight, but a step up in competition. I still think it's one of those like to get at least 15 fantasy points from Jordan. Um, I would not be surprised if that's, I think, a safe floor. I think they are going to increase his workload compared to just how they spread it around last week. I also think he has that potential that he could pop off a lot of big runs. You know, these advanced stats of allowing 5 touchdowns last week and a 60% third down conversion rate, I think that's going to be great for USC to just keep driving down the field or that potential to break off big plays here. So this is another one of those names where people had high expectations in week one. Maybe they got scared off by the way that the offense just kind of spread the ball around to everybody in their production. But I wanted to sit here and say Wayman Jordan, USC, start him. My last pick here at running back, going with Daniel Hishaw, Kansas. They are having a rivalry game, taking on Missouri. Vegas is calling on Kansas to only score 22 points. And when I start looking at the breakdown on this one, I only gave it a C plus fantasy grade. Um, I'm not a big fan of how I think Kansas will match up against this SEC defense. And Missouri, their advanced stats, I'm not a huge fan of because they whooped up on an FCS school. But Missouri gave up no rushing touchdowns, third down conversion rate of 15%. Both of those are really bad. But one thing that I did find surprising, and this could be a positive sign for Kansas here, red zone touchdown conversion rate was at 50% against, I forget who it was, Central Arkansas, I think, is who Missouri took on. So if Kansas can get down in the red zone, that 50% touchdown rate, it's not bad. But the thing is that they're going to have to get down to the red zone to begin with. And that's the part that I find a little scary. When I'm looking at this matchup, it is a rivalry game. And for those of you that don't remember the old school Big 12, I'm talking BCS era when the Big East was still around. That old school Big 12 was one of my favorite to watch. And some of these old school Big 12 rivalries, like anything can happen. I think Hishaw is a great player. I think he's a guy that you want to make sure that you have on your team. He's going to be a linchpin in your running back room, but I just have my reservations this week. Something tells me that Missouri defense will probably be too much to handle up front. I think Kansas will try and get the ground game going, but something tells me Jalen Daniels will probably be needed to actually get rushing yards. I also think that they're probably going to be forced to have to throw the ball more in this one. I don't know how well this Missouri offense can do if they can pull out to a big lead that forces Kansas into throwing and having to abandon the run more. This is going to be the first big game for Missouri quarterback Pribula. So I think there's still some question marks there. The game script could keep things in line where Hishaw could still be getting mixed in as Kansas is trying to keep that Missouri defense balanced. But for me, I just have a hard time picturing Hishaw getting 80 yards and 1 touchdown. I would not be surprised if he gets 65 and 0 with some receiving yardage. So for me, it's just one of those. I think the safest thing is put him on your bench unless you are just so desperate for options, whether it's at running back or at flex. Um, I would leave him on the bench. So wrapping up the running backs here, Daniel Highshaw, Kansas, sit him. Take another sip of water here before we start the wide receivers. I am going to lead things off with one of my favorite players from draft season. Any of you guys that were loyal followers to my content during the spring and summer, I planted my flag. God, it might have been around May. I think it was. It was the spring transfer portal. I put my flag on Carl Chester to be the dude, the wide receiver one, standout fantasy wide receiver one at Southern Miss. Last week, he didn't put up a lot of fantasy points, but he was targeted early, often, and heavily. I watched this game because I'm very invested. I have way too many shares of Carl Chester that I took with like my last pick in every draft. But I really liked what I saw from him and the Southern Miss offense against Mississippi State, a team that I felt like they had more flashes on offense than I expected to see for them matching up against Mississippi State here. So I'm bringing up Carl Chester here. They're now Southern Miss is taking on an FCS opponent. I've given this a B plus fantasy matchup grade. I don't have any advanced stats because I'm not pulling those for the FCS level here, and Vegas is not providing a line for us to have a projected score for Southern Miss. But I'm very much liking this game to be a explosion party for this offense all around. So Carl Chester's one of those guys if you happen to pick him up on the waiver wire, or he may still be available right now because he didn't put up a lot of fantasy points. I will tell you, go grab him if you need that, that extra third or fourth wide receiver. If you need that flex and you're struggling for spots, Carl Chester is absolutely worth not only grabbing him for this week, but I'm going to tell you, once they hit conference play, man, I am so all in on Carl Chester, and I've been this way for months, guys. I can't hype him up enough. This is a little bit of a pat myself on the back pick here, but I'm going to say Carl Chester, Southern Miss, start him. Next up, I have Caden Lee from Ole Miss. They are taking on Kentucky. Vegas is calling on Ole Miss to score 30.5 points, which I do feel like is a little low, but with a new quarterback, I can kind of understand where Vegas is coming from here. Fantasy matchup grade wise, I am giving this one a B minus. UK played Toledo. I do think these are good advanced stats that we can go off of because we're going to realize that Old Miss should do even better with these numbers. So I do like to point them out here. Uh, Kentucky only gave up one passing touchdown against Toledo, but I don't think that was an offense that was really built to try and get a lot of passing touchdowns. This Old Miss offense definitely is. Um, Kentucky gave up red zone touchdowns 66.7% of the time. And they gave up, they had a third down conversion rate of 41.2. Both of those are pretty good. Those are what I would call light green stats for those of you listening on Spotify. So I love the fact here, even though the score is low and Kentucky is known for ball control, limit how much the opposing offense can have the ball, and playing tough defense. When I look at these advanced stats of red zone touchdown conversion rate and third down conversion rate, I think these are very promising for Austin Simmons to get this offense moving here. And in that first game with Ole Miss, we saw the ball. Harrison Wallace was getting fed quite a bit, but the ball was getting spread around a lot. They were working a bunch of players in. And I just have a feeling that Caden Lee, it's not that he's not going to have a role in the offense. I think it was just one of those days that you know, the game plan just kind of called for mixing guys in. Let's see what as many guys can do as possible so we know who we can lean on potentially against Kentucky. And I think the coaches know and that they can lean on Caden Lee. He's going to be a great playmaker on the inside along with Daquan Wright at tight end. So, it's one of these things of I'm going to say don't be afraid. I think Caden Lee is worth putting in here if you drafted him and I do think this matchup's going to be better than it looks on paper. Like I said, I can see Ole Miss scoring more than 30.5 points because of these advanced stats that I brought up, the red zone touchdown conversion rates. But also, in order to get to the red zone, you have to convert third down. So I do like that third down conversion rate from the Kentucky defense as well. So to wrap this one up, we've got wide receiver Caden Lee, Ole Miss, Start Em. Our last wide receiver here is another name, kind of like Caden Lee, a guy who was drafted a lot. A lot of people put him in their lineups last week, and they didn't like the results, and now they might be a bit hesitant. And that is Jacoby Lane from USC. We mentioned earlier they're taking on Georgia Southern and expected to score 45.5 points. Looking at this from the passing perspective, I give this fantasy matchup a B grade. I'm not going to review the all of the advanced stats again, but one of those things I did like the 60% third down conversion rate of this um, Georgia Southern defense is promising. Jacoby Lane is one that I'm just going to say I'm on the fence on, and I wanted to kind of give you, uh, I know I want to give you guys solid answers on stuff, but I like to hear you too. Like I want you guys to be able to hear me kind of struggling a little bit, and really where if I'm picturing him as my last receiver or a potential flex, where maybe you've got guys that are hurt or just deep league, whatever it is. Um, there are other options out there. Like I brought up Carl Chester. If you have the ability to drop a guy and pick someone up, I'd rather put in a guy like Carl Chester than Jacoby Lane. But I do think that this could be a good matchup. I think the difficult thing with the USC offense, and I did try and limit my exposure to their receivers because we've seen this over the last 2 to 3 years. It's just a hot hand scenario from week to week of which wide receiver goes off, but then also is the ground game overly featured in the game plan versus needing to throw the ball. And that's one thing that I look at with this week. I don't think USC needs to throw the ball. I think that their passing game could be a lot like last week, where the ball's going to get kind of distributed around. I think that ground game is just going to shorten it out, get an easy win, and get your team out of there without getting any major injuries. So I do think there's a decent chance that Lane could have I'm going to say not as bad, but a little bit better than what he did last week. So if you want to play it safe, and I mentioned this last week, I have not mentioned it yet, and some of these picks I have aren't exactly playing it safe, but I do always like recommending those first 2 weeks. Sometimes it's better to take a high floor play than to shoot for the moon. And this is one of those examples why I wanted to bring up Jacoby Lane. I'm not a huge fan of his ceiling. I think he has that potential that he could be low again. So for this one, and it's out of caution, if you don't have the ability to get better options, I'm still going to kind of recommend Jacoby Lane, USC, sit 'em. Going over to our tight ends now as we wrap things up. I'm going to start off with kind of an easy pick here, even though there's some things I see that might give people hesitation if you really dive into stats. But if you look at the service level, you're probably going to agree with me right away that this is a start option. But we have Tanner Koziel from Houston. They're taking on Rice. Vegas is calling on Houston to only score 26 points. I almost mispronounced that one there. I can't read today, guys. I'm going to take another sip of water here. Hang on. Vegas is calling on Houston to score 26 points against Rice. Um, I'm not sure how I feel on that one. I don't know how confident I am that Houston could do better than that. Uh, but from a fantasy matchup, I gave it a B minus, which is still pretty good. In essence, like really good is anything in the A range, pretty good is something in the B range, C is average, D is kind of bad, F is really bad. So, it's still a B minus. Um, Rice played an FCF school, FC as in Charles. So the passing touchdowns allowed, the red zone conversion rate. I'm going to skip those because I don't think they're going to apply, and they were zero and not applicable. But one thing I did like here for Houston, this is one reason why I think with the tight end, you need them to be able to have long drives where he has more opportunities to get targets. And Rice, their third down conversion rate against an FCS school was 46.7%. That's very good from a fantasy perspective here for us to look at. So this is one thing that I do like for Koziel to have more opportunities to get those targets, and we know that they like him down around the red zone too. So you're going to need uh, to convert those third downs to get yourself down in the red zone to give him those red zone opportunities. So I like the way that Rice's third down conversion rate stat matches up with this suggestion. So I'm going to say Tanner Koziel, Houston, start him. Next one here is Joe Royer from Cincinnati. They are taking on Bowling Green. Vegas is calling on Cincinnati to score 33.5 points. I have a B plus fantasy matchup grade for this one. And Bowling Green took on an FCS school. They only gave up one passing touchdown allowed, and the third down conversion rate for them was 28.6%. Neither of those are that great here. They're worse than average. For a fantasy matchup wise. But red zone touchdown conversion rate against an FCS school was 100%. I was not impressed with the Cincinnati offense in week one. I think they really struggled. And I'm a bit down on this offense this year, but Joe Royer is one of the few shining diamonds in the rough here with this offense. And I think that they are going to really try and emphasize getting the ground game and getting the passing game clicking and having a balanced game plan against Bowling Green. And I think Royer is going to get his targets in this one. And the fact that, I can see them looking at him down around the red zone with Bowling Green giving up touchdown every time an opponent gets in the red zone. I love that here. And, Vegas is calling on Cincinnati to score over 30 points. So at least 4 touchdowns. I'm hoping that Royer can snag 25% of those projected touchdowns from the score here. So this is one where I'm going to say, don't be afraid of last week's performance. Royer is one of the few guys on this offense that I would recommend putting in there because I think he is stable enough and he can provide you a safe enough floor for this matchup. So Joe Royer, Cincinnati, start him. And last one here is Carson Ryan at a BYU. They are taking on Stanford, and Vegas likes BYU to score 33 points. From a fantasy matchup grade, I give this one a B minus, even though I think it kind of flirts on the line of a B, which is pretty good. Stanford, I forget who they played, but if it was an FCS school or somebody else, but I wasn't very impressed with the way they looked. And Stanford gave up 2 passing touchdowns in week one. Their red zone touchdown conversion rate was only 50%, which is average. I'd like to see a little bit better there, but I'll take average because the 2 passing touchdowns allowed is above average. Third down conversion rate was 30%. That's less than average. Not ideal. But I just believe this BYU offense is much better than the Stanford defense. I really do think that they're going to get things clicking. Carson Ryan, I do think, is going to have more opportunities for targets. This one I think it's just going to be a matter of how much do they throw the ball versus run the ball against Stanford. I don't know. They could start off being balanced, and we still have a freshman quarterback. We don't have a great feel for exactly who does he want to lean on. We only have a 1 game sample size to go off of here. But if you're in a deeper league, if you might have picked him up off the waiver wire, I'm going to say if you have more of a top end guy, I'd recommend somebody else. But if you have Carson Ryan and another guy that you're kind of iffy on, I'm going to recommend Carson Ryan, BYU, start him. Okay, guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in here for my selections for this week's Start Em Sit 'em podcast episode. Each week, I post a thread on X and Substack asking for your start sit questions. If you want help with your lineup, please join in that discussion. Submit your questions to me. I'm going to jump over to letpurplerain.com where I will answer those submitted questions. When you go to the article, scroll further down from where you see the YouTube, and that's where you're going to find it here. And you can also find a link in the description below for that article. You've been listening to Start 'em, Sit 'em. Please follow on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks for joining the Let Purple Rain podcast. Your CFF Rain starts here.